Hi everyone, and welcome to an episode of the Inside Social Work podcast. This week's episode is a bonus episode. I have a social work student working with me at the Therapy Hub, and part of her final presentation or final project was to present a webinar culminating some of the research and things that she's learned on her placement. So Piera presented this webinar a little while ago on understanding anxiety, in particular understanding anxiety in teens. So if you're a parent of teens or you work somewhere like a school or a youth centre with teens, then this will be a really good episode for you to understand some of the signs and symptoms and how to have a conversation with a young person around anxiety. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy this little bonus episode.
Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today for the session Understanding Anxiety in Teens. My name is Piera Ibrahim and I'm a final year student, and today joining me is Marie, the owner and therapist at the Therapy Hub. I'm looking forward to spending the next half an hour just sharing some insight on this really, really important topic. And I'll also be asking you for some feedback via the chat box. So as I begin my presentation, I'm now going to turn my video off, as I would really like for you to focus on the content in front of you. So let me just see. Stop video. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so just to begin this webinar, I just wanted to welcome everyone here today. The Therapy Hub is committed to cultivating inclusive environments, and so we celebrate, value and include people of all backgrounds, genders, sexuality, culture, bodies and abilities. And I also want to pay my respect and acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and communities as the traditional custodians of the land which I'm working on today, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So in today's webinar, what I would like to be covering is what is anxiety and actually what causes anxiety. And I'm also going to like to talk about how to identify anxiety in teens, and I'll be speaking about the symptoms that commonly teens might be able to display. And also I'm going to be covering tips on how to initiate a conversation with your teen about their anxiety. And I'll move into also covering self-help strategies just to promote relaxation and help to reduce anxiety in your teens. And lastly, I'm going to be covering how to know when your child may need professional help and what are the options available. So what is anxiety? So we've heard it floating around a lot. I'm anxious, or I'm feeling anxious, or I have anxiety. But what is anxiety really? Now, anxiety is a normal human experience, and we all feel anxiety. In fact, it can actually be helpful when anticipating frightening situations. And so this is because the physical symptoms of anxiety are coming from your body's nervous system response, which is a natural reaction to a feeling of fear or worry about what's to come. So you may also see how your teen deals with feelings of anxiety, particularly when they are responding to a stressful situation. So it's a feeling of fear or apprehension about what's to come. So this might be, like, for example, it could be their first day of school, or going for a job interview, or even giving a speech which, may cause most people to feel fearful and nervous. Now, if you're thinking, okay, well, what causes anxiety? Well, studies have shown, and what researchers are saying is that they're not exactly sure what causes anxiety, but it's a combination of factors that play a role. So this includes genetics and environmental factors, as well as brain chemistry. So when I talk about environmental factors. That could include things as what I just said about like being on stage, or being triggered by taking a test, or even being around people. So suffering from anxiety can make you want to avoid certain situations and places. So anxiety can be caused by a number of things, and for some people, they can experience anxiety for absolutely no reason at all. So if anxiety is normal and common, when do we actually know when it becomes problematic? So, as we go through life, there'll be many important life events, both good and bad, that can cause different levels of anxiety. So the main difference, though, between normal anxiety and problematic anxiety is if the feelings of anxiety are extreme, they last for longer than 6 months, and are interfering with a person's life, then the anxiety may be considered problematic, or in some cases, it may be even, the beginnings of an anxiety disorder. And if it's left untreated, anxiety can start to impact on your teen's life in terms of, for example, their school grades, their behaviours, and even their relationship with others. So it's really important to just be aware of, if you're starting to see that perhaps your teen is exhibiting, these symptoms. So before I go to the next slide, I want to ask you, and perhaps Marie can let me know if you use the chat box or the chat function that we have available, what do you think are perhaps some of the symptoms of anxiety? Give you a couple of moments just to think about what might be some of those symptoms. There we go. So Marie's got coming through. Okay, wobbly legs. Yes, yep, sweaty hands. Yep, shortness of breath. Great. Yes, butterflies in stomach. Great. Yeah, body feeling. Yeah. Great. So some great, just the different symptoms. Let's go and see some of the other symptoms. Okay, I'll just close that. Okay, so as you will see, the symptoms of identifying anxiety in your teens. Now, while anxiety symptoms can be experienced differently, for each person, in general, the body reacts in a very specific way to anxiety. So when you feel anxious, your body goes on high alert, looking for possible danger and activating your fight, flight, or freeze response. So some of the common symptoms of anxiety to look for in your teens may include, for example, worrying a lot. Now, if I say worrying a lot, maybe or perhaps your teen might not be using some of these words that you see on your screen, but might be sharing feelings like, or saying statements like, I've got a lot on my mind, or, my head is about to explode, or I can't think straight. Another type of symptom is feeling very nervous and afraid. So again, your teen might say, "Oh, I can't do anything else," or "I can't sleep," to indicate that they're feeling very nervous and afraid. Another symptom is trouble breathing. So you might hear the term that sometimes is used like, "I can't catch my breath." Another symptom is numbness or tingling in the hands or feet. So again, your teen might be sharing, "Look, I've got pins and needles in my hands and my feet." Another symptom is feeling dizzy. So the teen could be sharing that maybe their head is spinning. Feeling very weak. Some of the common language that the teen might be expressing is, I have no energy today, or I don't want to do anything, or I just want to have a rest day today. Sweating. So again, you might actually visually see that, your teen is looking uncomfortable, looking quite flustered, or, moving their clothing item, just feeling very uncomfortable. And it might also be accompanied with comments like, it's really hot in here, or I'm boiling, when perhaps, it's not quite hot in the room. Headache or stomach aches, again, very common, especially in younger children, where they might say they've got pains in their stomach. Teens might say, look, I'm not feeling well, or, my head's thumping, or I'm feeling sick. So another, common symptom. Heart beating really fast, which is another symptom of anxiety. Again, there is the saying, and that perhaps your teen might share, my heart feels like it's skipping a beat. Muscles feeling really tight, again, another symptom. So your teen might be sharing that they're feeling, a bit tense, or their muscles are feeling really achy or sore. And lastly, we've got, having a lot of thoughts going on through your teen's head. And again, it could be just through a conversation, your teen saying, I just can't think straight, or I just can't think properly. So listening to the symptoms that I've just shared with you, and the ways that sometimes teens can be expressing their ways of feeling anxious through different ways of expressing, I wonder if there are any other comments that you've heard your teen, share with you that might indicate that they are experiencing anxiety. And again, using the chat function, perhaps you might want to add a phrase that you have heard from your teen that might indicate that they're experiencing, these types of anxious symptoms. Okay, chat's coming through. Do I want to go outside? Yep, those people are there. Sometimes I work with because they can't sleep because they have too many thoughts and worries. Yes, really common type of statement from teens. Is there any other ones that I have to talk to those people? Yes. That's great. All right. Yep. Avoiding places and not being able to say why. Yep. And yep. Great, Lisa, as well. I'm going to go and sit over there. Yep. So we can see, and just by looking at these examples, and even in the chat function, of ways that teens can express when they're feeling anxious, and being just aware and mindful of that. So when it looks, about perhaps, just initiating a conversation with your teens about their anxiety, the Gottman Institute came up with the 5 steps of emotional coaching that really marries well in how to go about in actually initiating these type of conversations. So I'll just go through the different steps. So the step 1 is about being aware of your child's emotions. So as we just saw, just through the chat function, as well as the previous slide, there's a range of different ways that perhaps sometimes we can see, or we can also hear our teens, expressing that things, might be quite stressful or anxious for them. So it's important that picking up on your teen daughter or son, if they're looking, say, for example, restless or fidgety, or they might be, skipping a meal and saying that they're not hungry. complaining of a headache, just any of those which could indicate that they're feeling stressed and anxious. So being aware is really important. The second step is recognizing the emotion as an opportunity for connection. So this is where, showing your child, I guess the respect and understanding in the moment when they feel misunderstood or upset or frustrated, and finding, I guess, the appropriate time to talk through their feelings with them and try to understand their source. Where is it coming from for them? What's going on in their lives that is causing, I guess, these feelings and these emotions. Step 3 is about helping your child to label their emotions. So in this step, this is where you are identifying your child's emotions. So it could look like, for example, you are looking really worried or anxious, or I can see that you are really stressed out at the moment. So it's really, really helpful for a teen or a child to be able to make that connection with what's going on and labeling that emotion. Now, step 4 is communicating the empathy and understanding. So this is a really, really important step because it's important that you're not dismissing your child's feeling. So dismissing, I mean, it could be things like, saying something like, "Oh, don't worry about it," or "I think you're stressing over nothing," or, "It's time to put on your big boy pants." It is really unhelpful and is dismissing a child's feelings and emotions. So it would be helpful instead to demonstrate to your child that you can identify with their feelings, such as saying, "I would feel like that if I was," for example, "if I was going back to school after being away for so long," or, "I can see how difficult it would be for you right now." That's really important to show and communicate that empathy and understanding. And the step 5 is about setting the limits and problem solves. So this is where you're showing your child that you respect their attempts to solve problems and also to guide them with trust and affection, and working through these experiences together. So these are the 5 steps that was, in terms of emotional coaching, that can really help with even initiating this conversation with your teens and helping them to sort of open up and where you can connect with your teen to support them, especially in this time of where they're experiencing anxiety. So looking at all of that, what anxiety is and where it comes from and the symptoms, I think that the good news is that there are things that can, help your teen to treat their anxiety. And, so for some people, medical treatment might not be necessary. And sometimes it's just really a lifestyle, changes for your teens, which may be enough to cope with their symptoms. So if your teen is suffering from anxiety, he or she can help lessen some of their symptoms by doing certain things on their own. So simple lifestyle changes that they can, perhaps do at home or outdoors can help further alleviate, their anxiety. So I'll go through with some of those self-help treatments that can be really, really helpful. So one of them is, getting exercise. Now, I know that, that there might be teens out there that do not feel like, undertaking exercise or getting outdoors. So it may be important to even try and encourage them, by getting involved as well. So maybe asking them to go for a brisk walk or go for even a bike ride with you. And, if you know the teen in your life and what works and what helps them encourage, it could be a simple encouragement like saying, "Okay, let's go to the local shops and we can get a bubble drink, if we go for a walk there or a bike ride." I think it's important to try setting up an exercise routine with them that you can follow, or they can follow most days or all days of the week, because as we know, exercise, it releases natural endorphins, that feel-good feeling. So getting them out, getting some exercise in them, it really helps them to reduce their stress and their anxiety. Avoiding alcohol, smoking, and recreational drugs, because what we do know and what research shows is using alcohol or drugs or smoking can cause or increase your teens' anxiety. Now, that can be a really sensitive topic with your teens, and if they are having trouble quitting, I mean, it's important to speak to them about perhaps seeing their local doctor or their family doctor, or to look for a support group for your teen that might help. Other things that can also support is there's the quit line, perhaps getting brochures that you could leave at home, or just some help support numbers around that they could access, and so it's available to them. Reducing or eliminating the consumption of caffeinated drinks. So that caffeinated beverages that I'm talking about, it also includes coffee, tea, energy drinks, because they can actually make anxiety worse. So if you see that your teen may rely on these type of drinks, especially energy drinks, can be quite popular amongst teens, you might want to discuss with your teens, healthy alternatives, like perhaps replacing an energy drink with a drink, the Barocca drinks, or even stocking up suitable, healthier options like drinks, in your fridge. So again, it might be healthy options that are more available to them. Trying relaxation and stress management techniques. I mean, these self-help strategies sometimes is often met with resistance from teens, especially when it's about relaxation and stress management techniques. So you might like to encourage your teen to participate in meditation, perhaps together, or you can help them practice visualization techniques, especially if they are having difficulties relaxing, their minds. Or you might do like an online yoga with them. All of these really help promote relaxation, and it reduces anxiety. But if your teen is rejecting all of these options that I've just covered in terms of yoga, positive visualization techniques or meditation, then there are wonderful relaxation apps that a lot of these, there are quite free, accessible apps like Smiling Minds, Calm. Headspace also has one. Another one is called Stop Panic and Anxiety Self-Help. And another one it's called Colourify, which is about even just colouring in. So where you can do that on your app, and it can just help shift that mind in doing something relaxing. Another self-help strategy is getting enough sleep. And a lack of sleep, as we know, can increase your teen's feeling of restlessness and anxiety. And so if they're having trouble sleeping, again, it's important to speak or get them to see their doctor for help, just to see if there's any underlying issues that could be tested through a blood test, or might need some support, or even natural remedies like melatonin. But again, it's something that perhaps if it's really impacting on your teen's life, to really explore what's going on if they're not getting enough sleep. And again, you might also want to encourage electronics to be switched off an hour before bedtime. And again, I know it can be quite tricky with teens, but again, studies have shown that the blue light from these electronics, whether it's the iPhone, it actually impacts the ability for people who produce natural melatonin, that sleepiness feeling. It is hindered when electronics are used just before bedtime. So if those I just went through those self-help strategies, but again, there might come a time where that's not enough, or self-help strategies can go in conjunction with professional help. So there are different options. There's mental health therapy. So that's where, talking with a therapist can help your teen with treating their anxiety. And, a therapist can help someone suffering from anxiety learn how to better cope with their symptoms, so that, they are not as intense, and it's also be helpful to talk about their triggers to see, why it's causing anxiety for your teen. So that could be, really helpful in mitigating those anxious feelings. Medication, as I mentioned, it won't cure anxiety, but it can help to decrease the symptoms. And so medication typically used to treat anxiety includes, antidepressants and sedatives. And they work to, balance brain chemistry, or prevent episodes of anxiety or ward off most severe symptoms of, especially in anxiety disorders. So again, it's what the GP would discuss if that would be needed. And another option is free mental health services. So there are many free, like 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, help, phone services available, which I'll just go now to. So these are all free mental health supports. And I think it's that if, your teen feels like, anxiety is more than it should be, or it's starting to affect certain areas of your teen's life, then it's really important that just to get the ball rolling, even if that means, again, reaching out to your GP or accessing these free mental health support services, or even, at school, there's sometimes support wellbeing staff that they might feel more comfortable in discussing. And as you can see, even, for example, like Partners in Wellbeing, it's a free phone-based service that people can contact if they need support at this time, especially with this pandemic and knowing that it's really having an impact on teens' mental health at the moment. So even if they're feeling, just a bit down or overwhelmed, worried or nervous, or just wanting some support over the phone, these are services that are available to them. But again, if you are concerned that your teen is at immediate risk of suicide or self-harm, again, always encouraged to, call 000 and ask for support and assistance. So bringing this webinar to a close, I would like to finish off with an inspiring quote. And I always think that even if you find, an inspiring quote for either your teen to find or for yourself, sometimes it's important to help them get through some difficult days, especially if they're feeling overwhelmed and anxious. I found a quote. It says that the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another, from William James. And I think that sometimes having something to hold on to, an inspiring quote, can also help, with these positive affirmations. So that could also be another thing to include in helping to support your teens, of having some, positive affirmations or written statements around the home, to get through sometimes those difficult days. So I'll leave it open to see if there's any questions of what I've covered today. Anyone have any questions, statements? Okay. So are there any tips for parents or teachers on how to manage their anxiety when they're worried about a teen? A very good question. So in regards to tips for parents or teachers on how to manage their anxiety, I think it's important to get help themselves, because I always say sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So it might be, again, being able to, it could be speaking to a doctor, a GP or a therapist, the wellbeing officer, at seeing, what are supports out there for that teen. I've got here, making the referral was easy by getting them to engage is very difficult. I'm a social worker working. Yes. Look, I have heard that sometimes teens don't want to engage with actual staff, at the school, because whatever then sometimes they're going through, they have to see that person. There is, again, different services that, are available. I've just got Lisa. So it says if some of these anxious symptoms have been slowly worsening over 6 months or more, is that when? Absolutely. So as I mentioned, in when it becomes problematic, if it is slowly getting worse, and especially that it's over 6 months, it's really important that they are seeking some professional help, again through a GP, getting a mental health plan, seeing what supports are available. There's Headspace, especially for the teens, and seeing if they can get access to see a mental health therapist to support them, because as I mentioned in my previous slides, that it will get worse if left untreated. Yes, and head to health. And fine. So we could, after the session, there are many different, finding a psychologist. Psychology Today has quite a range of different counsellors, social workers, psychologists that you can reach out and see their availability to get that help and support. Anybody else? Or feel free to get online if you like. Okay. So Marie's got, if anxiety is normal, what are some of the ways to support a teen to sit with their anxiety, not be scared of developing an anxiety disorder? So in terms of, again, as I mentioned, that anxiety that we all experience, that it's looking at perhaps maybe what are their triggers, what is going on for them that is creating this anxious feeling, how long it's been going for, and what are the things that they could possibly do. So as I mentioned in the previous slides, there's some different ways, through, again, meditation, mindfulness and activities. There's those apps that I mentioned about being calm, to allow them to say, okay, it's just a thought, and that my thoughts don't necessarily mean that they're real, that they're just thoughts. So allowing them to have things to, I guess, do some things that they enjoy doing, and finding ways that are relaxing for them. But again, if it's getting worse and it's becoming problematic and it's impacting their lives, that's when it's important for them to start reaching out for that support, that professional support, whether it is from school, from their GP, sometimes a local community. There's a lot of youth organisations and things that are online to see different ways they can get support. Yes, so we have a mental health first aid workshop that is coming up. There's, perhaps if I bring Marie into it, just to share about the tuning into teens and also the mental health first aid.
Sure. So it's a really great program where mental health first aid is run over 14 hours. And it teaches people how to notice the signs and symptoms of a variety of common mental illnesses. So we look at depression, anxiety, eating disorders, psychosis, and substance use disorder. And it really gives participants a chance to understand some of the signs, the symptoms, and some of the stats as well. So you have a bit of an idea of how common some of these are. and where to go for help. So kind of like physical first aid, where we learn, to if we sprain an ankle, to rest, ice, compress, elevate. You can't forget that RICE acronym. Mental health first aid has a similar process where it talks you through what to notice, what to look for, how to have that conversation in a supportive and empathic way, and how to know where the boundaries are of your role. So what you can realistically do as a mental health first aider, as a parent, as a teacher, as a friend, a neighbour, a colleague, and then where to go for help. So that's a really helpful course. We do run some at the Therapy Hub, so you can have a look on our website, or you can have a look at the Mental Health First Aid Australia website, and there's a whole range of instructors out there. There's also conversations about suicide and conversations about non-suicidal self-injury. So they're both half-day workshops where we hone in on those skills around how to talk about those two potential crises. And then there's also tuning into teens. So that follows up with the emotion coaching, where we look at how do we develop emotional resilience and emotional intelligence in children. And that has come through the Gottman Institute. There's tuning into kids, which is for parents of children, and then tuning into teens as well. So they're also both really good personal and professional development opportunities. So I'll put some notes to those in the Facebook event, as well as those where to find a psychologist, where to find a social worker, some of those links as well. So if anybody wants to kind of grab some of those links, you can have a look in the Facebook event.
Right. Anybody else got a question, or is there, I guess, something that has made them think about, okay, maybe I'm going to try to implement something that was covered today? Feel free to share, or by the chat, or come on, turn on your camera.